Of the agenda, the petition presented by Pablo Torres of Spain, petition 1241/2019 on behalf of Enfermeras Eventuais en Loita on the situation of nurses under fixed-term contracts. We have the petitioner by a remote link, Ms. Cartucha Lagaron Mayo. We welcome her. You have 5 minutes to express your petition, after which we will hear from the Commission and the MEPs from the different parliamentary groups, and then to conclude, you will have another 2 minutes to conclude your petition. So go ahead and welcome.
Ms. Lagaron Cartucha.
Hola. Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. First of all, allow me to thank this committee and its chair for giving us the opportunity to present our petition. I'd particularly like to thank the Vice Chair, Tatiana Zanotka, who welcomed us a year ago in Brussels, and we were able to explain in detail the petition that we are presenting to this committee. I represent the collective Enfermeras Eventuais en Loita, which has thousands of nurses as members, and we suffer from the terrible management of the Galician health service when it comes to temporary contracts. Our petition refers to the abusive use of fixed-term contracts by the Galician health service, Sergas. It uses these contracts to fulfill permanent, long-lasting needs. This uses a fraudulent circumvention of the law, and it is contrary to European norms, as has been stated in the parliamentary resolution against unstable, insecure employment, as has the Committee on Employment. Both the Parliament and the Court of Justice of the European Union have denounced this very serious problem. Very briefly, I'd like to share our daily experience with you. For years now, us nurses have been listed on a temporary selection list, and we can be called at any moment to go to work. Sometimes we're given 3 hours of warning, sometimes less, before we need to start our shift. If for any reason we're unable to do so, we are penalized, and those penalties involve being unable to work for 15 days up to a whole year, and this means that we have to be constantly attached to our phones. In addition, if you become ill and are unable to work, the penalty is 1 month without being offered a new contract. When it comes to spending time and being with your family, that's impossible, because our reality is that we need to be available for the Galician government 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And the framework statute on permanent health services personnel, Article 9.5, states that there must be equality between permanent and temporary workers, and we should, after all, as we have the same duties, we should not be denied the same rights. In addition, 89% of temporary nurses are women. The average age is 32 years. That's the age at which, according to data from the National Statistics Institute, most women have their first child. However, on average, we spend 12 years in this very unstable employment condition without being able to plan our daily lives, and we constantly have to be waiting for that phone call to go to work, and thus we are forced to postpone becoming mothers because we are seeking this employment stability. We work for days on end, working between 20 and 25 days in a row without any break. We consider that this situation should be investigated by the European Commission as it violates Directive 2003/88 in Articles 3 and 7. We will send documentation of this. Throughout our working life, we sign an infinity of contracts. For example, many of my colleagues have signed more than 500 contracts, but they've only worked for a total of 6 years. For years, we have been suffering from this, and we know that this situation undermines the law on transparency as well. For years, we have been asking our administration to resolve this problem, which also affects the safety of our patients. It affects the quality of care that we offer them. For years, we have been fighting for this situation to change. thanks to Ana Miranda, we were able to bring this problem before the Parliament. We feel that we are being heard here, and we hope that changes in the contract policy of our public health system can be achieved. And we ask you to keep this petition open, and we ask the European Commission to continue investigating the violations committed by the Galician Health Service and the Galician government in its temporary contracting. In our country, we have some of the worst nurse-patient ratios in Europe, and yet the number of permanent positions are highly insufficient, far below what they need to be. In Galicia, temporary nursing staff makes up 40% of the total, and this is continuing to increase because that figure comes from before the COVID-19 pandemic. This petition was presented a year ago, before this terrible virus created such terrible risks for the healthcare system, and unfortunately, the situation continues to get worse. With the first wave of COVID, those contracts continue to be on a day-by-day basis, so that one day we would be working with COVID-positive patients, and the next day we would be working with vulnerable patients. We were aware that we could unintentionally become transmission vectors from one health service to another, since there wasn't enough personal protective equipment. We think it's necessary for this petition to remain open, and that there must be an investigation into the contractual abuses committed by the Galician government to ensure that we can be treated with dignity in our work, and we should have the same rights as any other worker. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we'll give the floor to the European Commission, specifically Mr. Pokorny.
So thank you very much, Chair, and many thanks to the petitioner for such a clear and persuasive exposition of the grievances behind this petition. And first of all, let me say that from the side of the Commission, we of course fully recognise the importance of the work that nursing staff do, and particularly in the time of this dreadful pandemic, and we want to express our very strong support and appreciation for this investment that she has presented to us. And indeed, we have an investigation ongoing on a number of the elements which have been raised in this petition, which has not yet reached a satisfactory conclusion. The first issue is, as the petitioner expressed, the fact that there are no sufficient measures in place to prevent the abuse of successive fixed-term contracts, and the shocking figure that was cited of an individual having 500 contracts over a period of only 6 years is just one example of these approaches, which indeed have been condemned by the Court of Justice in the Sanchez-Ruiz judgment, the case number C-103-18. And we are in close contact with the Spanish authorities, who are reviewing their legislation in order to remove the clauses which lead to such abusive practices, and to put in place provisions which would then fulfill the requirements of the directive, the 1999 directive on fixed-term work, specifically clause 5 on anti-abuse measures. But that process is not yet finished, so we are holding our investigation open, and we are in discussion with the Spanish authorities about the amendments to be made to the statute governing the working conditions of public employees. On the issue that was raised about being called to work at very short notice, there is a new directive which member states must implement by August 2022, which brings in a number of protections for workers who are in precarious or unpredictable employment situations. This is Directive 2019-1152 on transparent and predictable working conditions, and that indeed has provisions on a minimum predictability of work where employers are required to define time slots and where the worker may and may not be called to work, and so these reference hours and days, and also that there must be a reasonable notice period when a worker is called in to perform an assignment. So this is indeed designed to prevent precisely the situation that the petitioner raised of effectively requiring people to be available 24/7 in case they are called by the employer to perform work. And we would very much welcome more information about the arrangements that lead to working times of 20 or 25 days the petitioner referred to without rest, because that indeed would be contrary to the Working Time Directive, to the 2003 Directive on working time. So far, the information that we have received on the legal framework under which this work is done did not show that these arrangements were permitted, but if there is further information that the petitioner could let us have under the conditions under which these long periods of work without the weekly rest periods being respected, how these may be performed, under what conditions they are performed, under what legal framework, then we will of course investigate further. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Radan Kanef, EPP Group.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, dear petitioners, dear representatives of the Commission, I think the situation is rather clear here from point of view the problem we face. We had numerous petitions on the same issue. We had a resolution of the European Parliament. We had a clear verdict of the European Court of Law and several statements of the Commission. What is clear, I think, is that this petition shall remain open. What is unclear is what are our next instruments, because obviously there is a highly precarious situation, something which is really out of the basic workers' rights regulation within the European Union, a persisting problem, a combination of several abuses, and which is at the end of the day most important, abuses performed by public authorities of European member states. So for me, there is no point whether the petition should remain open or be closed. Of course, it should remain open, but I feel a bit confused and frustrated, frankly speaking, because I don't have the answer. What should we really do after that? Thank you.
Thank you. Now has the floor Ms. Maestre Martín of S&D.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the petitioners. Thank you to that movement of temporary nurses, workers on temporary contracts who are defending the dignity of work. This is a clear example of precariousness in the sector, not only for nurses, but in the healthcare services in general. There are many who are victims of certain legislative reforms which were carried out in our country, in Spain, and which caused great instability, excessive instability in the labor market. These statements from the nurses and from the representative of the Commission led me to wonder what has happened with the government of Galicia, that we have not had any explanation or justification from its part. Maybe that's not up to this committee, but an idea that I would like to express is the idea of asking the Galician government to provide some kind of explanation regarding how over the long term, we are seeing this unfair type of contracting, which is not in line with European standards. It's not in line with the rights of European citizens. And the Court of Justice of the European Union, in its ruling from last March, has stated that this is violating European citizens' rights because it is, as I said, against these regulations. And as much as I want to support the petitioners, I also want to support what was said by the representative of the Commission. 5 or 6 days ago, the Spanish government presented a proposal to carry out a modification regarding what we're talking about here, namely the idea of doing away with precarious employment, doing away with these constant fixed-term contracts, as the nurses have presented it here, but also as many citizens have presented here. These are complicated times, but for a long time now, people have been victims of this unfair reform. And so this proposal of the reform that has been sent to the European Union means that we are getting ever closer to overcoming this injustice which continues to exist in my country. Thank you very much. And of course, we want the petition to be open. Now, Mr. Cañas of Renew. Thank you, Chair. First of all, allow us to express our support to maintaining the petition open. And I'd like to make a couple of points. First of all, that the situation of abusive use of fixed-term contracts in public administration is a common standard for all public administrations, including the general administration of the state. I would like to make a general review of the topic and then make it clear that that when it comes to not meeting these rules, when it comes to abusing these fixed-term contracts, it is up to the government of Spain that needs to answer to this. So beyond the issue of not bringing its rules in line with European level standards, what it's doing is opening contracts for workers who in some cases have been working for 5, 10 or 15 years in fixed-term temporary contracts. And some of these solutions involve leaving these people on the streets, unfortunately. I'll give an example. In Spain, a very high number of temporary workers are suffering from a situation that constitutes abusive use of these fixed-term contracts. Many of them are women. I believe it's over 60%. These people are in this exact situation described by the petitioners: instability, uncertainty. They're not able to plan their futures. This is a problem that affects all of the public administrations, and it needs to be resolved by the total of public administrations. They need to be brought into line with the European standards. It's not just about the standards for public sector employment. It's the administrations that are abusing the situation with these contract conditions, which are unacceptable. Often they're hour by hour in very important sectors, including health, as we have seen during the pandemic. We've seen public health personnel on the first line given contracts hour by hour. That is not a problem that is limited to Galicia. It's not a problem limited to local administrations. That is a problem for all Spanish administrations, and the Commission must ensure that this is avoided. The inspection, oversight, control work needs to be carried out so that all public administrations, in this case the direct interlocutor with the Commission, the government of Spain, needs to apply the rules and ensure that the public sector workers who are living under these abusive conditions are protected. Thank you. Thank you. Now, Ms. Danoka of Greens.
Thank you, Chair, and many thanks to petitioners. I have met the group of petitioners just 1 year and 1 month before. Today, it was December 2019, and no one knew of us what will happen in 2 months and how the health workers will be needed in our extraordinary situation of pandemic. And these people are hardly violated and abused. And I saw personally this huge list of hundreds of fixations of just fixed-term contracts we have heard just today. It's enormous. It cannot be allowed in our democratic society. And we know how heroic work the nurses, are doing during this year, and have to thank them, not to discriminate them. And we have in our portfolio a lot of things to start infringement procedure just now, not waiting when new directive of 2015 mentioned by representative of the Commission will enter into force. We have already 2 directives which are obviously violated, mentioned already 70 from 99 and 88 from 2003. We have decision of the European Court of Justice as of March 2020. We have a resolution of the European Parliament as of May 2018. On the basis of this all, and taking into account that these directives are openly violated, we have to ask the Commission, and I propose it as one of the decisions of our committee today, to start infringement procedure, an open infringement procedure. And as it was mentioned, it's not only, but in this case, in the case of this petition, these are Galician authorities, but it is more broad case not only in Spain, I guess, we have Italian petition also. So I thank once more the petitioners. They are very brave, they are very well organized. It's an association of nurses. And I thank Ana Miranda, my former and future colleague, who just initiated this submission of this petition to our committee. And we have to act.
Thank you very much. Ahora tiene la palabra la señora.
Now, Ms. de la Pisa of ECR. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Excellencies. From our group, we note the irregularities in the contracting of public health service personnel. We see that fixed-term contracts are being used to cover long-term needs. This is an unsustainable and unfair situation. It is contrary to legislation, and it's particularly serious when it is the administration and the social security services that are granting these contracts. This situation, as my colleague has already said, is not limited to Galicia with the Galician Health Service. It is occurring across Spain. It is a widespread practice of public administrations, and it is a long-standing one. Both the Popular Party and the Socialist Party, in collaboration with the independent parties, that have allowed this to happen. We feel that to resolve this situation, clear positions must be offered through competitions which allow for an assessment of experience and technical knowledge, and rewarding experience at the personal and professional level. All of this must serve to ensure that nobody will find themselves in this terrible situation, a situation which has created so much disappointment and uncertainty. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we will go to the second round of speakers. Mr. Mian Mon from EPP has the floor. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the petitioners for coming to this committee and telling us about the situation. Health is a fundamental public service, as we must recall every day. May I continue, Madam Chair? I apologize to Mr. Rego. I skipped her in the first round from the left. I'm in your hands, ma'am. I suppose that Ms. Rego will not object to Mr. Mian continuing, and then I can give her the floor afterwards. Ms. Rego? No? I suppose not. Go ahead. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, the proper functioning of public health services is a priority for all citizens, and for the Popular Party that I represent in Galicia and Spain and in Europe as a whole. I would like to make a number of statements and specifications to describe the situation and put this situation, which comes from Galicia, into proper context. If we look at the percentage of fixed-term contracts in the total number of contracts in the health service, we see that it's 73%. And over the recent years, despite the economic crisis, Sergas, the Galician Health Service, has made great efforts to have public calls for contracts. Roughly 2,100 nurses have been hired, and last year a total number of 830 new nursing professionals were hired. The most recent decree by the council of that region states that in the next call there will be 466 jobs opened for nurses. The Galician administration has always taken advantage of the maximum rate of personnel granted by Spanish legislation with priority to nurse positions. So it allows for the number of permanent positions in the nursing staff as is permitted by legislation. And it has worked with personnel to try to find labor stability measures. For example, since January of 2019, it has launched the new system for contracts which are 1 year long, which can be extended up to 3 years, create greater stability. During the pandemic, we must recall that on the 25th of November, about 3 months ago, Sergas had a sectoral negotiation that approved the contingency plan for COVID-19 in terms of human resources. It was approved with the support of unions, workers' commissions, and other organizations which represent the majority of the sector. Sergas has responded in this way to situations such as the pandemic with sufficient human resources to face the outbreaks. We recognize the important work of the frontline healthcare workers against COVID-19, and they have created the new system of temporary contracting for health emergencies. Thus, Sergas is strongly committed to professional advancement and stability for nurses. That said, the European Commission has recognized that it is looking into the question of whether there are sufficient means to avoid abusive use of fixed-term contracts. The Spanish government, Mr. Cañas has said this, for example, has recognized that this is a problem with the basic state legislation. And recently a reform was announced. The representative of the Commission tells us that they are in contact, and so we are facing a more broad issue that affects all of Spain, and I suggest that the Minister of Territorial Policy, who is competent for this basic legislation, to draw her attention to the situation of the petitioners. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Citarrego. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I was afraid you had forgotten me. Thank you very much. Yes, first of all, of course, I'd like to thank the petitioners for having brought this petition to us. Of course, we support this petition. And in the current situation, I'd also like to thank them for the great effort that they have been making since the start of this pandemic under very difficult circumstances, after years of cutbacks in the healthcare system, which in many cases these cutbacks are due to decisions by European institutions with the support of some of the colleagues who have already spoken and who have referred to the issue of structural instability. And a lot of these decisions that have been made have these types of consequences. And of course, there is the role of the Galician regional government. I think that without any doubt, we're talking about one of the visible sides of what the severe cutbacks on the healthcare system has caused in Spain. We understand that there's an increase in instability for healthcare workers, a dramatic increase in the precariousness of their work. And this, of course, leads to a reduction in the quality of life. Under normal circumstances, that's already a terrible problem for our health. And of course, in a current situation of a pandemic, that is a very serious problem that we need to address. We agree with what the petitioners have stated, namely that this is a massive labor fraud which continues and causes to continue precariousness and instability. It makes it very difficult for these workers to plan for the future. It's very difficult emotionally for them to deal with the instability in the day-to-day. And sometimes they end up having to change profession or even leave the country altogether in order to be able to work under fair, proper conditions. As the people who use the healthcare system, we deserve a high-quality public healthcare system, and I think it is absolutely necessary to strengthen high-quality public services in Europe. And one way to do so is ensure that temporary work contracts is no longer the standard for public health workers, because that ends up affecting the health of society as a whole. I think it is absolutely necessary to protect the first line of attack against the virus, and we need to protect those who protect our lives. Thus, we ask from the left to maintain the petition open, to send a letter to the government of Galicia for them to clarify why they think that this fraudulent labor practice improves the healthcare system's quality. Why are there not public calls for tender for personnel, given that there is a lack of personnel? And under the existing legislation, what measures are they taking to modify their contracting policies? We all think it is very important to bring the petition back to this committee once we have the opinion from the Employment Committee. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Rego. Now we'll give the floor to Mr. Nicolás González Casares from SND. Thank you, Madam Chair. Let's not put everything into one basket. This is a very specific petition from Galician nurses addressing a chronic problem in the Galician health service, something we've been seeing for years. I would say it's an endemic problem. I'm a nurse in the public healthcare system of Galician. I have signed hundreds of contracts, and almost all those contracts were when I was a temporary worker, by the day, by the hour. The committee recognizes that this is a problem. I thank the organization Enfermeras Eventuais en Loita for having brought this problem to us. Thank you, dear colleagues, because we need to show our bravery, and that's what you're doing. Working days in nursing and contracts in nursing are contrary to all labor rights when they're carried out in this temporary way. Days on end without the right to disconnect, something we discussed in the previous plenary. That's impossible for them to do, because often they need to have their phone on all the time, because they know that if they get a call and they don't answer, and that was a phone call to answer to propose a contract, they will be penalized and they won't be able to work. This is affecting their life plans. It increases the precariousness of their lives, and it increases pressure on public health. Also, it's not something that's truly temporary, that only arises sometimes. Rather, it undermines the stability of the healthcare system, a right of citizens. This undermines rights, it undermines legislation. It's a repeated, serious problem. And it's problem, possibly it happens elsewhere in Spain, outside of Galicia as well. This is something that has been seen in the nursing profession, but is not known among the citizenry as a whole, and it has caused nurses to leave Spain altogether because they cannot work. Hundreds of thousands of people have had to leave Galicia. Nurses specifically have had to move to other countries to seek work outside of Galicia. They might go to Spain, they might go to the UK, they might go to France, but they have to leave to get a decent life. And what does this mean? We need to keep this petition open. We need to study it closely, and we deeply regret that the statistics from Mr. Villamon regarding the fact that it's not the government of Galicia that's providing this data, and it is not facing this problem as it should. Thank you very much. Now we'll give the floor to Ms. Ribaginet from the Greens. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you to all of the members of the group Enfermeras Eventuais en Loita. Thank you for your petition. We have seen the support from Venega and Ana Miranda in the group, and they have brought to the attention of this committee the situation of precarious employment that these nurses have been in for years. It shows how austerity policies have weakened the healthcare system. The detailed information in this case shows how the authorities in Galicia have made abusive use of temporary contracts to cover permanent staff positions, which, as has been said, is a flagrant violation of the directive on fixed-term work. And, as has been mentioned already, this situation undermines the directive on working time, and it is contrary to the resolution on precarious employment approved in May of 2018 by this Parliament. The Court of Justice of the European Union, on the 19th of March of last year, confirmed that the Spanish authorities have not taken the appropriate measures to prevent this abusive use of fixed-term contracts in the public healthcare system. Thus, from the Greens LE group, we ask that this petition be maintained open and that a letter of complaint be sent to the government of Galicia and that the Commission launch infringement procedure against the Spanish government. Thank you. Thank you. Now we'll give the floor to Mr. Nicolau Alabanos. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Τους αναφέροντες για τη συγκεκριμένη αναφορά, γιατί μας δίνει η δυνατότητα να κουβεντιάσουμε.
Thanks very much indeed. It's very, very important that we have this possibility to talk about this very important subject. This is itself a pandemic and it spreads right over Europe here, right through our member states. The European Union has to really get to grips with this. It's about resources, and the budget has to really take account of this terrible problem. What are the allocations dealing with this situation? As far as Greece is concerned, we've heard a lot of discussions along the way, ideas from health experts here and there who are responsible for dealing with pandemic issues. I think it's really, really important here that the health sector as a whole takes account of the well-being of its staff. We need proper contracts. We need proper employment relationships. This itself is a sociological pandemic. There are all sorts of rules and regulations about this. For example, WHO has an interest in this, and it's really too bad for member states. The European Union has its own health policies and strategy, but what's the role of a free market here? I mean, is there any real involvement and intervention in the way our market economies work? If health is dealt with as a business, if it's a way of making profit, then none of this adds up, none of it works. We need strong systems, and the pandemic itself, the other pandemic, has to be seen as part of this situation, not only the spread of these abuses, but the health situation within this particular context. Now, there's associations and organisations which work very hard in this particular area, and that's very important. We need proper reimbursements. We need proper refunds. And I think when people get tested, for example, they need to be refunded. The vaccine is not a magic wand. It won't solve everything. We need greater resources in health. We need greater staff. And we need, as I say, proper employment relationships, not these abusive contracts. I think the Petition Committee really has to do something about this. We need proper discussions and a proper follow-up on this in the proper committees in the Parliament. Thank you.
Muchísimas.
Thank you very much. Now we'll give the floor to the petitioner to conclude the petition. So 2 minutes for Ms. Katusha Lagaron Mayo. Thank you. We thank the European Commission for its statements, and we thank the members of the European Parliament for their statements. The Commission has confirmed that there is an abuse here, and we ask that this investigation remain open and that the abuse be denounced. Of course, we can provide more information about how we work several contracts in a row without a break. We welcome that the committee has decided to keep this petition open and that has been supported. What we want is a solution. We are exhausted, particularly in this pandemic situation. We are in favor of the opening of the infringement procedure. I consider that the representative of the Popular Party is not being exact in the statistics he has provided, because the part that he didn't count in the total staff is that, for example, 75% of the positions being considered fixed or stable is not quite accurate. They have a specific type of interim contract which is for temporary staff. They are not permanent staff of the administration. That is a tool which only they use. It is not open to us. It is contrary to the law on transparency, as many other situations, other measures do as well. The issue of a year-long contract can involve us being in a totally different service every single day, meaning that we cannot provide quality care, and it prevents any type of continuity in care. In addition, the conditions under which these contracts, these continuity year-long contracts provide, mean that it only covers about 70% of our shifts. The rest they continue to give us on an individual basis. In addition, the idea that is throughout the Spanish government that this precarious employment exists, I'd like to say that in Spain, that competence falls to the communities. So it falls to the Sergas, the Galician Health Service, to decide what type of contracting it uses for the healthcare system. That's not new. We have been living with this precarious situation for more than 10 and 11 years. I can give you examples of people, of nurses like myself, who have been available on the lists for 10 years with 575 contracts, 6 years of Social Security contributions, and many of the contracts for only 1 day. Worse, with 32 years, this woman has been on the list for 11 years, 7 years of Social Security contributions, 300 contracts. Various positions approved and still on the temporary list, and she doesn't even have an interim contract. The interim contract, as I said, is not a permanent contract. It is a temporary one. So, I thank the committee for keeping this petition open and for continuing to investigate the situation, because this is not a minor issue. This is an issue that affects public health, and it affects all citizens. At some point, we will all use the public health service, and we want it to be a high-quality service. Thank you. Thank you very much to the petitioners for the excellent work that they are doing more than ever now in this pandemic. Having heard from the petitioners, the Commission, and all of the different members from the different parliamentary groups, the proposal of the presidency is to maintain this petition open and to request the Commission, as the Commission has explained where the file is right now, that there is an investigative stage and that it is in working with Spain regarding the basic legislation. So we ask the Commission to continue keeping us informed at all times about any progress that there might be between the Commission and the government of Spain to resolve this problem and the basic legislation. Thank you very much.